John Gilbert, congratulations on your recent Academy Award nomination, Hacksaw Ridge. How did it feel when you got the news that you had been
Look,
nominated?
it's sorry. Yeah, it was. My phone started buzzing at about 5:30 in the morning, and I knew it was the possibility. So, it's exciting. It's really exciting. I know that Oscars are the big party of the year, and it's nice to have a ticket.
Well, you've been to the Oscars before, since you were nominated for First Lord of the Rings movie 15 years ago. What was that experience like?
When I was nominated for Lord of the Rings, I mean, I knew nothing about it. I'd always worked in New Zealand. I'd never worked out. Maybe I'd done one film out of New Zealand. So it was just a total unknown. And, I was surprised. I got people screaming down the phone at me at 3 o'clock. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, I think, in New Zealand. And, I really didn't understand how big a deal it was at that point. So it's different this time. I kind of know what I'm in for, and I think I'll probably enjoy it more this time because I kind of know what's going on. And last time I was in New Zealand most of the time, I missed a lot of the parties. I missed a lot of the pre-Oscar events. So this year I've made sure I'm going to be here, and I'll definitely be in for it.
Well, good to know you're going to be enjoying the experience, and congratulations once again. Let's talk a bit about the movie. How did you get involved with this project?
I was working with Bill Mechanic on another film, and he talked a little about Hacksaw Ridge and how it was his next project. And I finished up the film I was doing with him, and I knew he and Mel were doing on a scout in Australia. I knew the essence of the story, and I thought this sounded pretty good. But Mel Gibson, unknown quantity, I'd never met him. So I organized with Bill to get on a plane to go to the Gold Coast where they were recceing, and so I flew in from New Zealand, drove about 2 hours to the Gold Coast, met him at a hotel, and talked with him for, I don't know, half an hour, and had dinner with him, and got on the plane, went home again, and I didn't really hear that I'd got the job for another month or so at least. So it was kind of weird. It's always tricky working with a director for the first time because you've got no idea what they're going to be like to work with, and they've got no idea what you are, and it's all hearsay until you actually get together in the room and start working. So I'm really happy that obviously Bill put in a good word for me, and maybe Mel didn't have anyone better couldn't find anyone better than me, that he trusted more than me. So I got the gig, and I was really pleased, and it was a fantastic gig to be on with him.
What about the project spoke to you and made you want to work on it?
Well, I read the script, and the story of Desmond Doss is such a fantastic story. It's hard to believe it hasn't been told before. And apparently Audie Murphy visited Desmond Doss in Virginia in the 1950s, or when Audie Murphy was making a lot of movies, and tried to convince him to tell his story. But Desmond Doss is an incredibly humble guy and didn't want to draw attention to himself. He said, no, I'm back at home. The war's gone. Forget about it. And eventually his church talked him into it. And a documentary was made maybe 15 years ago, I think. And he was in his 80s by then. And I guess his church talked him into it. So it was a fantastic story. And, Mel has obviously made some great films. I mean, Braveheart, Apocalypto, The Passion, all his films have been hugely successful. And the combination of an actor, he's a little bit of an outsider, idiosyncratic, iconoclast. I like that. And I like someone who doesn't run with the crowd, who can tell a story in his own way, and will maybe do a few things a little differently. He obviously, of the violence of the battles, he talked a bit about that, and he wanted to make it real, and he wanted to push the boundaries a little bit, which he obviously did. So all that I found exciting and challenging. And when I learned the cast, Andrew Garfield, I like him as an actor. Everything seemed to be coming together. And Bill, I enjoyed working with Bill as well as a producer, who, as a producer, he wants to make good films. hugely supportive producer. So you know, all the elements were there, I thought. And it was in Australia. I mean, for me, that's almost like a home job. It's only 3 hours flight from where I live.
So as a matter of convenience is what made you ultimately choose.
Well, you know, that wasn't top of the list. That was, you know, I've done jobs in Eastern Europe as well. I'm happy to travel if something looks interesting.
Right, absolutely. So what's interesting about the film is that it's almost divided into these two halves. I mean, you have the first part, which is his life in Virginia and meeting his sweetheart, and then joining the army and going through boot camp and having this crisis of whether or not he's going to be able to remain in the army without carrying a weapon. And then the second half is all of this incredible battle sequences, Battle of Okinawa, and him performing these acts of courage. Melding those two halves into a cohesive whole, I mean, was it difficult or easy or?
I mean, the first half of the film is about setting the emotional landscape for the second half, I guess. It's if you imagine Private Ryan, what happened to the first 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan, if you'd known those guys and had an emotional investment with those characters, the emotional impact would have been a lot greater. So the first half of the film is about setting the landscape and not only Desmond and what he believes in, and finding him a likable, honorable, strong character. Obviously, he had to be very strong to go against all his peers and conventional wisdom in carrying a weapon. So, you know, I think we discussed for a while making the first half of the film go a little faster, because it is quite conventional, and we tried that, but the second half of the film has a lot more impact if the first half of the film is quite leisurely. And we put a 2 or 3 minute battle scene on the front of the film just to let the audience know that, okay, it's coming. So if you find a little slow, and some people have found it slow, and not everyone, but some people find it a little slow, but they know what's coming next. So I don't think they were motivated to leave the cinema. But yeah, it's about making sure that the emotional footing of the film is really solid. And then when you change gears and get into battle, yeah, there are people you have enjoyed in the film before that who are getting blown apart, and you know, it's horrifying because you know them, because they're people that you've you know, have got some sort of complex character behind them.
And it gives you a lot of context as to why he would refuse to carry a weapon, and also the amount of courage that it took within him to save the lives of all of these men. You know, you're setting all that up in the first half of the movie.
Well, and also the battle scenes are quite violent. I mean, they're deliberately quite violent because his decision to go back into battle, if it's not, if it doesn't look like certain death, it devalues his decision. He had the choice of leaving the battlefield with his fellow troops and going to safety, or going back into what appeared to be certain death. It's a remarkable decision to make, and I don't think very many people would make it. In the documentary, he said, "I couldn't value my life any higher than my fellow men," which, you know, given our instinct for self-preservation, that's a remarkable thing to override that self-preservation. And you know, he says just one more, just one more. Every time he rescued one more person, it was never enough. He could always rescue one more. It was only his life against what turned out to be 75, some people say 100 men he hauled off the ridge that night. So, you know, he saw that as a bargain, I suppose, 1 for 100. And if he got killed in the process, so be it. You know, it was this huge act of faith, I suppose. I mean, if you're a religious person, there is that aspect to it. And you know, I'm not a religious person, and Mel is. You know, the audience can, you know, it's part of the story. That's his faith, and it's a remarkable thing.
Absolutely. Let's talk about the battle sequences because they're incredibly put together. As the editor, when you're presented with all of this footage that you've been given of these battle sequences, how do you begin to even piece it together in such a way that it is coherent and effective?
Well, I guess when you start, with the footage that comes in the door each day, you go through it and you find the bits that work, and you start assembling small sequences, and some of them might be 20 seconds long, some of them might be a minute, and there's a script that you start with, so you assemble these things in the order that they're designed to be assembled in, and then as you start to build up an amount of this stuff, you start moving it around. The idea was for it to be totally unrelenting, like there was no time for the audience to relax and switch off. The audience was sitting there for the 11 minutes. The first battle is 11 minutes long, and I wanted the audience just to be on the edge of their seat or hiding behind their hands, as some people have turned out to be. It is traumatic, and it should be traumatic. And I had no music for the first battle. I wanted it to be 100% sound effects to make it super real. And the second battle, I added music, and the second battle is only about half the length of the first one when they get overrun. So by adding music, I could escalate the emotional impact of the second battle. And the third battle, which is probably half as long again, is shot mainly in slow motion. So it's more of a ballet. Each battle had to have a distinctive character, and I think that worked pretty well. We also had issues with smoke. The first battle was shot with a lot of smoke, so the enemy is hidden, and so that added to the chaos and the mayhem of it. But there were significant challenges in matching the level of the smoke and continuity, because of course you're out in the field in the middle of nowhere. One day the wind's blowing, the next day it's not. One day it's sunny, the next day it's raining. And the battle is shot over, several weeks. Not as many weeks as Mel would have liked, as many he's had on Braveheart or Apocalypto. So there were challenges with that too. I think he, found it difficult with the amount of footage he had to shoot quite quickly. But, each day on the battlefield with the second unit running, we had 6 or 8 hours of footage coming in. And, it's a challenge to work your way through it and find quite often quite small pieces of film, because obviously it's cut quite fast. Managing all that, it's just one thing at a time. You just keep building it up and building it up until you feel you've got it right.
Well, then how? Speaking of Mel, working with him and cutting these battle sequences, what did he give you as a director that helped you realize his vision of it?
Well, he just wanted it to be real. He wanted to push the boundaries in terms of the level of the violence. The very first guy that gets shot, he sits up, and they've been creeping over this battlefield, and we know they're out there somewhere, and we're kind of expecting something to happen. But this first guy that's shot up, it's a VFX shot, and it was a big challenge for the VFX people actually to have bullets carve up this guy. And a half-dead soldier who sits up kind of like a zombie, I guess. So yeah, we tried to set the tone with that shot to really shock people at the beginning, and we tried various, because it was a different control the level of violence. But Mel always wanted to push it a little further than everyone else was thinking. That's pretty extreme. I guess the standard set by Saving Private Ryan, really. So we wanted to do some things that made sure that we were upping the ante a bit on that. He was, he was always wanted the performances to be real. He wanted everything to be. I'm losing it now. Do you edit these things?
Not particularly. Did you want to?
No, that's all right. That's all right.
Okay. You seem fine now. Did you want to repeat something or?
No, I'm just thinking in terms of Mel. No, he just wanted it to be super real. He wanted to be super real. He wanted to believe the violence. He was. Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't know if I've got anything more to say on that lot.
Well, I mean, you said quite a bit.
Yeah, well, that's good. But hopefully you can get the scissors in there and chop out anything that's too random.
So I wanted to ask you also, you know, with a movie like this, we talk a lot about the complexities of the battle sequences, but the more quieter moments and the more emotional actor-driven moments, how difficult were those on a film like this?
Well, so quiet emotional moments can be just as difficult. You know, you massage the performances, you work through, and you always have to find the best of what the actors give you. And you know, there are challenges in terms of where the camera is and shot size, and yeah, a good dialogue scene, a good strong dialogue scene can be just as difficult as an action scene. To hold the audience and, you know, suspend disbelief for the duration of you know, the interaction between two characters. It's always, you know, trying to make it as finely tuned as you can with a combination of music and dialogue, and quite often we're chopping up actors' dialogue between different takes and using words from different places and so on. It's you know, there's a lot of intricate work that the audience hopefully is not aware of. It goes into you know, quite quiet, what seemingly is quite quiet dialogue scenes, and you know, the meaning of a scene can change in post-production, and you know, you have to do a little gymnastics with the material, but that's hopefully it's all invisible to the audience.
It is very seamless. Congratulations on that front. The film has had a wonderful impact on audiences and, of course, on Academy members, with not just your nomination, but 6 in total, including Best Picture. Why do you think the film has had such an impact on people?
Well, I think it's a combination of the battle scenes, kind of filmmaking. They're pushing the boundaries in filmmaking in terms of you know, the dynamic, visceral nature of the battle scenes. And also, I just think it's the strength of the story and performance. Andrew Garfield is fantastic as that character, and the story is such an unbelievable story that I think people really react to it, and you know, really feel. I've never had so many people come to me afterwards a film and say, "Oh my God, I cried in 5 different places. It was so moving." Interestingly, I had the documentary they made 15 years ago, or whenever it was. I got sent that before I started cutting the film, and I edited the little piece that goes on the end of the film before we started production. And I think a lot of people really react well to that, and they can say, "Oh my God, that's the stories he told. It's true. The story about him wiping blood from the guy's eyes." And he said, if I hadn't got anything more from the war than the look on that guy's face, I'd have been well rewarded. And the scene in the movie where he wipes the blood from the guy's eyes was actually written into the movie after I'd created the little sequence from the documentary at the end. You know, that was quite satisfying to be able to help with that. And I think that, you know, moments like that, people know that it's real. It's not... you know, people can say based on a true story, and you know, oh my God, you know, they made up most of it. But in this case, it really is a true story, and we actually had to tone it back. Some of the things he did on the battlefield, like when he was wounded and carried off in his stretcher, he actually stopped them because they passed a wounded guy on the ground, and he hopped off the stretcher, treated the guy, made them take the other guy away, while he crawled to the edge of the cliff himself, it was shot again in the arm, made a splint out of a rifle for his arm, and crawled to the edge of the cliff. You know, if you'd written that into the movie and filmed that, people would have said, "Oh my God, you know, forget about that. That's just pure Hollywood nonsense." They wouldn't have believed it. But in this case, you know, his heroism probably exceeded what we showed on the screen. So it's a remarkable story, and I think first and foremost, that's what the audience really reacts to.
Absolutely. Well, it's a great movie, and congratulations again on your nomination, and thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me. It was a pleasure.
All right. Thank you very much. Okay. Good night.
Good night.